From the standpoint of the current state of combat operations, things are still improving for Ukraine. In my opinion, if fighting is taking place in the Pokrovsk-Myrnohrad agglomeration areas, as well as, for example, in Lyman and Siversk, the enemy is advancing and our side is fighting to maintain logistical routes in order to ensure the operations of our units and formations in these areas where the enemy is advancing and the situation is becoming difficult and continues to develop this way. In the Kupiansk area, the map shows 2 enemy penetrations reaching as far as the center of the city. Meanwhile, our forces are holding the southern parts, trying to clear and drive the enemy out of these areas. But the most important thing is that our units and formations are cutting off the logistical routes to the northwest. And for them, this is already creating a serious situation regarding how to ensure their supply. From a military standpoint, this is something that needs to be organized. From a military perspective, this is understandable, which is why they are trying to transfer appropriate reserves to this area and to prevent our military units from effectively carrying out this strategic plan to completely cut off the vital logistical supply routes in Kupyansk. And in this regard, in Kupiansk railway junction and this pocket east of the river where our units are located, there are difficulties holding the position there. And if we also have logistical issues, since this goes through the bridges in Kupiansk and the crossings that the Russians are destroying. However, here the enemy is facing a kind of boomerang effect with their own logistics. They are primarily focused on securing their own routes, but they are also trying not to forget about cutting off ours. So, once again, from a military perspective, we are convinced that logistics has always been and remains the foundation of organizing combat operations. And these examples from current events demonstrate and confirm this.
Ihor Alexandrovich, which other sections of the front are also seeing intense activity right now? Which areas would you highlight and what is happening there at the moment?
Well, everyone is concerned about Pokrovsk, the agglomeration. The situation there is becoming more complicated. So the enemy is primarily trying to physically close the pincers that are forming to the northwest of Pokrovsk. This is a difficult position because our defensive district in Myrnohrad is also supplied by logistics by these routes. That's why the situation is becoming more complicated. And if you look at Myrnohrad, there is a sort of pocket to the south of it as well. And for our units and forces stationed there, the situation is becoming even more difficult because the area of possible withdrawal to the northwest has, so to speak, shrunk to about 2 kilometers, and even that is being thoroughly monitored by every possible means. So in the south, around Myrnohrad, considering that they have advanced on Myrnohrad from the east, from Novi Ekonomishny, the situation for the units in the south there, in my opinion, is already becoming critical. And it turns out, as the president mentioned, that the decision is left to the commanders at the tactical level, but most likely they really need to at least be moved or redeployed at this point further north towards Myrnohrad. So the overall situation, the trend is that given the forces we have there and with no additional forces expected, at least in my view, and I hope I'm wrong, the trend is such that perhaps slowly we should, well, starting from Myrnohrad, we should still be withdrawing from this area. And why else? Because we now have a new active combat zone in Zaporizhzhia Hulyai Pole. The enemy has made significant advances there and continues to make efforts to push further. Some groups are reaching their flanks, which are being pushed back by our forces. But the situation there has worsened, and you see we keep having new hotspots like it was in Dobropilia. There was an advance in Dnipropetrovsk region, and now there's this raid. By the way, there is also progress in Dnipropetrovsk region. Not in Pokrovsk, the city, obviously, but there's a settlement called Pokrovska. And In this Pokrovska, again, their tactic is to find such an opportunity and make a breakthrough. And there, they try to hold their positions as much as possible. And then there's Huliai Pole. This advance, this raid is now expanding in terms of opportunities for the enemy, and that's a serious problem.
Igor Alexandrovich, I'd like to ask you, with the arrival of winter, well, we're basically talking about the 1st of December, the calendar start of the winter period. So is there any understanding of how this might affect the intensity of fighting on different parts of the front? Or in general, is the situation now such that there isn't a 100% correlation anymore?
Yes, of course, weather conditions do have an impact. But previously it was believed, and we see this, that the autumn period, the mud season, roads in that condition, they hinder effective offensive operations. Well, maybe not effective, yes, but look, during this autumn period, those 1 or 2 months we had here, the weather conditions and the roads were like that. However, the enemy continued to advance both in the cities. We discussed this with you in Pokrovsk, in Kupiansk, and also in Donetsk region, where there are quite a lot of elevations, hills, and populated areas. Settlements where it was possible to dig in and organize a defense. All of this becomes even more complicated in the Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhia regions, where it's a flat steppe area, making it very difficult to organize a defense. Fortifications have to be built along the way. Probably not everything worked out from this point of view. And now, speaking of the weather, if the roads freeze even more, roads are just nominal directions, as the military say. If they're frozen, it means you can move quickly along them. And this gives more of an advantage to those who are advancing. So from this point of view, no significant improvements are expected. And we still have problems with reserves when it comes to personnel. They are categorically deciding to suspend the release of our youth. If necessary, then let them work on the labor front at our enterprises. But even so, over 100,000 have already left this month, including some who resigned from military enterprises. In other words, this is a completely counterproductive decision. It needs to be suspended, and decisive measures must be taken to maintain the defense forces' potential so as not to further worsen the situation.
Speaking of potential, the General Staff has reported that Ukraine's defense forces are now actively implementing countermeasures against Russian strike systems, particularly, for example, guided aerial bombs. And now more than 100 Russian guided aerial bombs have been destroyed just in the past month. What other similar achievements has the Ukrainian army had recently, perhaps only just now? Have there been any large-scale implementations like this? And how does this affect the situation on the front line? Yes.
I would like the scale of countering guided aerial bombs to be even greater. But for now, we are just at the beginning of the practical journey. That is in terms of development, and we've talked about this on your channel as well. Our company, together with our allies, is working on developing means. Destroying guided aerial bombs after they have already been launched. This is the most difficult option from the perspective of air defense, because the big global problem is the sheer number of various types of enemy drones being used en masse. And secondly, or perhaps even firstly, there are the guided aerial bombs, which we have to counter by destroying their carriers. This needs to be done either at the airfields or with long-range surface-to-air missile systems like the Patriot batteries, which have a range of 150 kilometers, but we have a limited number of them. That's why we need to find ways to counter guided aerial bombs. We have been working on this and have said that by the end of this year we will move to combat testing in this direction, and that's exactly what's happening. That is to say, our advanced drones, equipped with powerful jet engines, possess the incredible speed necessary to effectively catch up with or directly engage incoming aerial bombs, ensuring their swift interception. Moreover, they can also operate against enemy drones with jet engines, not to mention conventional ones. But for us, the main issue is scaling up production. In other words, such weapons already exist, they are undergoing testing and are proving to be quite effective. The question is how to produce as many as possible and to provide training. Operator training is a very serious issue. because it's extremely difficult to perform tasks at such high speeds. And here, to assist operators in this regard, we again need to produce more drones, meaning the more different types of our own, equipped with both individual and artificial intelligence, the better. This addition solves two issues. The first is that there is no need to have a higher level or be a highly skilled operator. That is, they are guided to within 150 to 200 meters, and then the artificial intelligence takes over the control and independently guides them to the target. So the operator's skill level doesn't have to be very high. And the second issue is that currently the number of drones and the number of operators must be the same. If 1,000 drones are launched, meaning anti-drones or drone interceptors, then 1,000 operators need to be trained as well. Artificial intelligence helps us work with drone swarms on our side. That is, a single operator launches a swarm of drones. They interact and operate against the enemy's drone swarm or any other targets. However, again, all of this takes time to implement. It's quite a difficult, complex process of scientific implementation, but it's happening right before our eyes.
Ihor Alexandrovich, thank you very much for joining our